Have you or someone you know been mistyped? Are you the victim of type confusion syndrome? Well, I'm Scott James from whattype.com, and for the past 12 years, I've helped hundreds of people just like you get clarity on their type once and for all, and I'm here to share one of the top reasons why people are mistyped. This video is going to be a little bit advanced. I'm going to assume that you have a basic understanding of the cognitive functions. If you're not familiar with the cognitive functions, you can go to whattype.com/functions to learn more. This video was prompted when I did a type reading session with a client last week, and this person had hired 4 other type readers before he got to me, and not only was there not a consensus on his type, but none of them actually got his type correct, and none of them could deliver clarity for him. So after about 20 or maybe 25 minutes, we got clarity on his type, and then we got into some discussion and Q&A, and I think it became apparent why he had often been mistyped in the past. And the reason for it is something that I've seen many times and something that I can also relate to myself, so I thought I'd share that insight here. First, I'll just give a quick testimonial that he gave for the session that we did. He said, "While I felt that other type consultants were fishing around in the dark, making their best guess, getting stumped with me, or at best confidently arriving at an answer that seemed to be based on a false or surface level impression of me, I felt that you were able to easily perceive the real me, despite that I've consciously or unconsciously built up some pretty thick armor to prevent people from doing just that." If you'd like to learn about type reading sessions via Zoom, you can go to whattype.com/mytype. I also do consultations, and if you have any questions that aren't answered on the sales page, you can hit the book now button. You can actually book a free 10-minute call where I'm happy to answer any questions you have. All right, that's enough self-promotion. Let's dive in. So I think the crux of the reason why he had been mistyped in the past has to do with how the auxiliary and the tertiary function shows up differently for different people of the same type. Now, the primary function for most people is going to show up pretty strongly. There's a very strong gravitational pull that we have towards our primary function. It's kind of hard to hide. So let's use the type ENTJ as an example. ENTJ's primary function is extroverted thinking. This is all about results-oriented, bottom-line thinking. What are we trying to do, and how are we going to get there?
A, B, C. A always be B, C closing. Always be closing. Always be closing.
So most ENTJs are going to type as thinkers, and they're usually going to type as extroverts and as judgers. Now, there's certainly exceptions to this. Just 2 days ago, I did a session with someone who had tested as an ENTJ and was clearly an ENFJ. So this does happen, but usually tests will be able to pick up on a person's primary function, and hopefully most type readers can pick up on it as well, but sometimes not. So let's look at ESTP, for example. So ESTPs, their primary function is extroverted sensing. So they are probably going to test as extroverts, they're probably going to test as sensors, and they're probably going to test as perceivers. But one of the reasons why an ESTP, for example, might be mistyped is they might be showing more of their tertiary function than you might expect. There could be an expectation that a person's auxiliary function is going to show up more strongly than their tertiary because it's higher in their function stack. But this may not be the case, and this is something that multiple choice tests are not equipped to pick up on. So why would a person's tertiary function be more evident than their auxiliary function? Well, I think there are a number of different reasons why this could be the case. And I'm going to preface this by saying I am not an expert in human development. These are just my observations for having done this for quite a while with quite a number of people. But this is really just my speculation based on what I've seen. So one of the keys to understanding this is recognizing that a person's auxiliary function is in their non-preferred realm, and their tertiary function is in their preferred realm. So what this means is if a person is an introvert, their auxiliary function is extroverted, but their tertiary is introverted. And as introverts, they tend to be more comfortable in the introverted world. The opposite is true for extroverts. If their primary function is extroverted, their auxiliary is introverted, and their tertiary is extroverted, again, where they feel more comfortable. Now, I'm going to paint an imaginary picture of an ideal person's upbringing here, but it's important to recognize that this is subjective, and no matter what your case is, how you were raised, what the circumstances are, I think one of the keys to personal development is just recognizing where you are, being honest about it, recognizing that there are advantages to however you are. And I think personal development is really just like jazz. So you can play any note, whatever note has been played, it can be made right. And there are advantages to your situation. So I'm going to turn this over to jazz legend Herbie Hancock talking about how he played what he thought was a wrong note and how Miles Davis made it right.
In the middle of one of the songs, during Miles' solo, I played this chord that was so wrong. I thought I had just destroyed everything and reduced that great night to rubble. Miles took a breath and he played some notes and he made my chord right. And I could not figure out how he did that. It sounded like magic, you know? It took me years to figure out what actually happened. Here's what happened. I judged what I had played. Miles didn't. Miles just accepted it as something new that happened. And he did what any jazz musician should always try to do, and that is try to make anything that happens into something of value.
So if you're watching this and you come to the conclusion, oh man, I didn't develop perfectly, I didn't have the perfect upbringing, don't feel bad. Life is like jazz, and overcoming adversity is what makes us interesting and hopefully gives us depth and some humility. So that being said, in this imaginary scenario where you have an ideal upbringing, your parents would know your type and they would understand you, and you would have all the resources necessary at your disposal and a great education, and you would be pushed into your non-preferred realm. You'd have an appropriate amount of challenge in that realm so that you could grow optimally. The auxiliary function is sort of designed to be the co-pilot of the primary function. So in an ideal situation, you will have developed skill and aptitude in your auxiliary function, and it will show up strongly in the outside world. So now let's talk about why a person's tertiary function might show up more evidently than their auxiliary. So I think there are many different reasons for this. I think just in general, stress is going to be something that's going to make a person spend more time in their preferred realm. So if you, or perhaps even your entire family, had a little bit more than optimal stress that you had to deal with, then it's likely that you're going to spend a little more time in your preferred realm and therefore developing more of your tertiary function than auxiliary. This can be the result of financial stress or emotional stress or even abuse, or it could actually be something as simple as the type composition of your family. So I'll use myself as an example. So I'm an INFJ, and my dad is an ISTJ, my mom was an ENFP, and my brother is an ESFP. So I'm the only one in my family who has extroverted feeling in his function stack. So regardless of any other factors, this is going to play a role in how my extroverted feeling and introverted thinking show up in the world. So if I was raised by, say, an ENFJ and an ESFJ whose primary function is extroverted feeling, you can bet that I would have had a more developed extroverted feeling function. The reality is I was a shy kid and I felt awkward in social situations. I actually unconsciously associated pain on some level with my auxiliary function. So extroverted feeling gives you a sensitivity to the dynamic of tension versus harmony. And being that I was shy and I didn't have a lot of skill and aptitude in the extroverted feeling realm, I, on some level, associated that with pain, and I had a lot of social anxiety that went well into adulthood. I was a deep thinker who spent a lot of time in his head.
And now deep.
I was not a gregarious people person. I learned to use alcohol as a crutch in social situations to make me feel more comfortable. But of course, that's not a good solution. Once I knew and understood my type, I could see the blueprint here for personal development. And I started learning specifically from ENFJs and also ESFJs and how they used extroverted feeling with skill and aptitude. And I talked to them about it and I took notes on it. And eventually I learned to be comfortable in social situations, and alcohol was no longer necessary. But when I was first introduced to type, it was at a seminar, and I actually came out of that seminar mistyped as an ISTP. I was actually mistyped a couple other times after this, and this sort of drove me to the ends of the earth because I knew that there was something to this whole Myers-Briggs thing, and I knew that it could help me relate to my family, which was something that was really important to me. So I dove deeply into the skill of type reading, and that's how I eventually learned my type and started to see the blueprint and started to change the way that I related to my family and to other people. So it was a huge game changer for me. So let's go back to the type ESTP, and let's talk about how the auxiliary and tertiary function might show up differently for different people. So I'm going to use the poker player Daniel Negreanu in ESTP as an example. Daniel Negreanu is considered one of the greatest poker players in the world, and I think he's a fascinating person, and he's made millions of dollars playing poker, and he's extremely good at it. Negreanu has a very well-developed auxiliary function, introverted thinking. This allows him to run calculations very quickly to be able to mathematically figure out what hands people are most likely to have. And his grounding in this logical, cool-headed realm frees him up to be able to do things that ESTPs naturally do well, like read body language and use showmanship to great effect, because introverted thinking is in the realm of unconscious competence for him. So he's able to use that to dictate his decisions. He's not just running on emotion. He's not all sizzle and no steak. He's using logic to be able to determine what he should do and how he should use his other skills.
Imagine like all the potential hands as being a part of a grid, right? So the first player to act, they could have any one of those hands, right? Anyone randomly dealt, right? But let's say now that that player raised to $3,000. Okay, well, you can eliminate now from this grid a whole bunch of hands that this player can no longer have. Because if they had a 2 and a 3, they wouldn't do that. So you can say, okay, he probably has a big pair, he has ace king, you know, you've narrowed the range of hands down.
Now we can contrast that with a fictional ESTP, Johnny Drama, from the series Entourage. So Johnny Drama is not known for being cool, calm, and calculating. He got the nickname Drama for a reason. He's using more of his tertiary function, extroverted feeling. An extroverted feeling as a tertiary function for an ESTP could show up as being dramatic or emotionally forceful or perhaps manipulative. Now, ideally, it would show up as a person being kind and empathetic. But if a person isn't perfectly balanced or they're having a bad day, then you might see extroverted feelings show up in a way like Johnny Drama is known for. So to use one last type as an example, we can use the type INTP, and this will also relate to INFP. So for introverted intuitive perceivers, their auxiliary function is extroverted intuition, and their tertiary is introverted sensing. So for an INTP, for them to develop their auxiliary function, they're going to need to get out into the world. They're going to need to experiment. They're going to need to put themselves in situations where they don't know what's going to happen. And the temptation for an INTP in the tertiary realm, introverted sensing, is calling them to stick to what is familiar and what's reliable and what's safe. So that wraps it up. I hope that was helpful for you. If you're interested in learning about type reading sessions, you can go to whattype.com/mytype. Once again, I also do consultations, and you can book a free 10-minute call. Just hit the book now button. Thank you.